recognized response of "Bah, humbug," perfectly expresses the worldview of Ebenezer Scrooge. Scrooge is a sad, sad man, and Christmas is not a happy time for him, but to be fair, no time during the year seems to be bringing him much joy. Since this original publication in 1843, A Christmas Carol has been presented in many different times and many different ways. Ebenezer Scrooge has become this iconic figure who represents stinginess, greed, and generally being in a terrible mood. To illustrate the negative image associated with the name Ebenezer, in the year 2013, you could find only 12 children in England with that name. Interestingly, though, Ebenezer is a Hebrew word meaning stone of help. You can find that in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12. Maybe you might even remember singing about it in the second stanza of "Come Thou Fountain of Every Blessing," where it says, "Here I raise mine Ebenezer, hither by thy help I'm come." Even though by the end of the story, Ebenezer Scrooge is a changed person, that character of his remains a strong caricature of everything our Christmas celebrations should be. It seems that we can't accept fully that Ebenezer Scrooge is redeemed by the end of the story. We keep thinking of him as that first character we meet. But maybe there's still hope. Maybe over the course of these next few weeks, even Ebenezer Scrooge's name might come to mean something entirely different to you. After all, if Scrooge can be redeemed, then so can we. Now, A Christmas Carol begins in a very unusual way. Marley was dead. Now, this is not your typical feel-good Christmas type of story. It has an unconventional hero in it, in his tale, where we are offered just a window into the world of the miser, Ebenezer Scrooge. And we're taken on this unlikely adventure with him. On a cold Christmas Eve, Scrooge encounters three spirits who reveal his past, his present, and his future, in the hope of transforming a covetous old sinner's heart. Now, this story makes me think very much about this Advent season that we're in. Advent, from the Latin word advenire, means to come. The 4 Sundays before Christmas Day, the church gathers to wait for the Christ child's birth. During this time, we read stories from the Old Testament in which God laid out the plan to send a Messiah to save God's people. We sing songs such as, O come, Emmanuel," and we anticipate the hope that God's people felt as they waited for their Savior. We light candles of hope, peace, love, and joy, like an emblazoned clock counting down to God's intervention. Now, waiting for something that has already happened is kind of a curious practice for us. This Advent season plays with our notions of time. We gather in the present to ponder the past for a future of hope. We remember those events that lead up to Jesus' birth 2 millennia ago. We also look back further to the way that God's people anticipated the coming of the Messiah. We also contemplate our more recent past with memories of our childhood or loved ones who have passed or moved away. We also actively participate through worship, through music, through decorating our homes and our church. We also turn our hearts and minds to Christ amidst this busyness of shopping and work and other responsibilities. We are mindful of how Christ is present in our world today, and we prepare to encounter Jesus in our lives. We are in a season of preparation. We prepare for the Christmas celebration, and we look ahead to Christ's return. Now, if we look carefully, we can find that A Christmas Carol is a story about how Scrooge cannot let go of his past. Scrooge seems to cling to the past because his only friend, Marley, represented the only thing in which Scrooge trusts. That is hard work, frugality, unwavering discipline, and action that can be weighed, measured, and counted. But Jesus came to save us from counting our past as our only reality. We can turn to the story of Exodus, when Moses led God's people out of Egypt, out of slavery, into the wilderness. Because living in the wilderness was difficult, and they were caught wandering between where they were and where they were headed to, people complained. They wished that they had died as slaves. They became stubborn and bitter, almost Scrooge-like. They became this way in their relationship with God and in their relationship with each other. Instead of moving forward in faith, trusting that God was with them, the people kept looking over their shoulders and hopelessly lamenting over the way that things used to be. Advent is like living in the wilderness between what was and what will be. Living into this tension, remembering God's promises, and depending on faith, become spiritual disciplines that keep us from becoming Scrooges ourselves. Even though the promised land may seem far off to us, we hold tightly to the promise of our God, for he who promised is faithful. This week I have an assignment for you. Take some time this week and watch a version of the Christmas Carol. It can be an old classic, it can be a cartoon, it can be the Muppets, I don't care. Watch one of those versions and look and see where it speaks to us now as we're entering this Advent season. What characters do we relate to? Are we Scrooge-like, or are we somebody else? Think about it. What message does that version bring to you through this Advent season? And so, let us ask our God of Advent and Christmas. Let us thank him for entering into our world as a child many, many years ago. And thank him for entering into our lives today. And thank him for the hope of his promised return. Next week, we'll be looking into our Christmas past. So I invite you back again next week for that. Amen. Would you please